InSTEM fam, welcome back to another episode of InSTEM Podcast. I'm your host, Tolu, and as always, I'm excited to bring to you today another conversation that is packed with value, tips for professional and personal development, and actionable insights from real people. In this episode, I'm excited and thrilled to bring to you a conversation with a special guest. He's special because we share the same name. His name is Tolu Falade. He's a chartered engineer with a killer background in the offshore oil and gas and energy industry. He's also an amazing advocate for youth empowerment and diversity and inclusion. Welcome to InSTEM, Tolu.
Thank you very much, Tolu. The way you said that, I was like, well, he's there. But no, nice to be here.
So, fun fact, guys. So, Tolu and I actually met at a mutual friend's party. And guess what? The name of the mutual friend is Tolu.
It's true.
Well, I can resist the opportunity to invite him onto the InSTEM podcast and, of course, capitalize on our shared name.
No, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So today we are going to be discussing all things career excellence, work-life balance from the angle of the offshore oil and gas industry. And we are also going to be talking about his recent win as the rising star in the STEM category of this year's Black British Business Awards. Get ready to be inspired.
Yeah, good to go.
So I love to start conversations on this podcast with icebreaker questions. And your icebreaker question is based on a viral tweet. I think it was maybe earlier this year or last year,
Okay.
whereby there was a question pasted on Twitter, which goes, if you were offered the choice, or if you were given the opportunity to choose between $500,000 or dinner with Jay-Z, which one would you choose and why?
I'm taking the $500,000. I don't even think that's a question. Dinner with Jay-Z would be nice, but I don't think I'm gonna get anything out of it. The problem with the dinner with Jay-Z idea is, yeah, you have dinner with Jay-Z, but you're still broke when you get back home. Well, potentially anyway. I'll take the 500K.
That's interesting. I think for me, I would probably take, it depends on which stage I'm at in my life. You know, there might be times where the connections are more valuable than the money, but yeah, that's my kind of approach to the answer.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could tell from the stage I am in my life that rather the money than.
So let's delve into the questions. So your background. So you've built an impressive career in the oil and gas industries. And whilst researching you, I also found out that you pursued a master's degree in renewable energy and sustainability. On the surface, the two industries might come across kind of contrasting, unrelated. So I wondered whether there was a strategic move made on your part there to build your career in the oil and gas industry.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one because I was thinking about the time when I did my master's out in 21. I was definitely not, you would not describe me as strategic at the age of 21. I think I was really interested in renewable energy at the time, but I'll say the main reason why actually, if I'm being completely honest, why I took the role was it was one of over 50 companies I applied to that offered me sponsorship at the time. And being a Nigerian citizen at the time on a student visa, it was more important to kind of, get a job. And I remember applying to BP at the time as well and thinking, I don't even, why am I bothering? I don't think they're going to want someone like me. I just did a, master's in renewable energy. I don't know what they're doing in the renewable energy space. And I did a bit of research. And at the time, I think they'd invested something like 600 to $800 million on the alternative energy division, which they were involved in at the time. So I was like, okay, there's potentially a link there. But no, I would say it was less by design and more by accident. Accident being out of, the companies I applied for, I got 2 offers from companies who could sponsor. BP was one of them. It was a really good opportunity and a good offer. The pay at the time for a graduate as well was really nice. So I kind of just sort of stumbled upon it. But, looking back now, I've been in the company 12 years or in the energy industry 12 years. It's good to have had that foundation, if that kind of makes sense, especially as a lot of traditional oil and gas companies, BP included, BP was probably one of the first pioneers, started to look at transitioning into energy as a whole than just sort of oil and gas. So having sort of that base knowledge of, doing a master's renewable energy, solar, wind, tidal, etc., is kind of a way to kind of bring that back, now as I look forward, I would say.
That's very interesting. So would you then say for those aspiring for a career in the energy and sustainability space, would you recommend a career or an experience in the more traditional oil and gas industry to be a valuable stepping stone?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting one because I think there are multiple pathways, for anyone who is looking to work in the renewable energy space. And I would never want to say, do this or do that. What I would say is give my own perspective on things. I think you have with renewable energy different sort of pathways you can go into. So you can go into, the solar, there's onshore and offshore wind, there's hydrogen, there's sustainable fuels, sort of using like biofuels and the like. There's carbon capture, which is around, again, reducing the carbon footprint of some of these renewable energy sources. Because, for example, hydrogen, when you look outside of green hydrogen, I think over 90% of the hydrogen that's created at the moment still comes with emissions. So carbon capture also becomes important, which then also makes it important for traditional sort of fossil fuel generating bits like oil and gas. So there's multiple angles you can go into. I think my perspective is when you look at energy companies that I think that the term is greening, not green now, but are looking to get green in the future, what they come with is a huge wealth of knowledge and experience in operating global major projects, with um, relationships that they've built with various companies, industries, countries, governments. And a lot of the work we're going to need to do, I think, around the transition is going to be around those partnerships, right? You could work for a pure play or offshore wind, a pure play, hydrogen, a pure play solar. But for example, in BP, and I suspect is the case with other known oil and gas majors, we're getting involved in everything. So you get such a huge exposure being in a traditional oil and gas company that's looking to transition. That expertise of kind of being in one industry, for a long time and have kind of like built like a record and a track record, you can then take that into projects that might have to be with wind, projects that might have to be with, solar, projects that might have to be with hydrogen, because they're still huge capital intensive projects, which don't realize a lot of value straight away. It's still over a period of time. So my view on it would be, why would you sort of exclude, discount, those oil and gas majors from, or an opportunity there? Because I think there's a lot of leeway or a lot of latitude they have in driving some of these things forward, because you might have the idea, but to actually execute it, is a totally different story. So I think there's multiple angles, but my view is, for those who are looking to get into the energy industry, don't discount, the sort of traditional oil and gas majors, especially if they've got concrete plans towards transitioning into other energy sources.
Interesting. That's another, different way to look at it. There's actually, what's clear from your answers, that there's a lot of synergies. So thank you for, breaking that down. Now, moving on to your offshore experience and work-life balance. Working offshore appears and comes across as a unique experience. Interesting. I had another guest from your company. I think it was 2 years ago that I interviewed them, and his name is Hisham.
Right. Yes. Oh, right. You had Hish on this. I'm going to let him know.
And he gave me some insight into what life offshore looks like. And I just wondered whether you could share some of your own personal perspectives and experiences as well. I think particularly for most of us that working more regular 9 to 5, will be cool to hear some distinct sort of moments or experiences offshore that maybe we might not be able to relate to.
Yeah, no, I think the whole the whole experience of working offshore is distinct in itself. I've been working offshore full time since the start of 2021, so just over 3 years, and only been doing this sort of leadership role since February. So I've worked on 2 different assets, 2 different locations, totally different. One was what you call an FPSO, which is a floating production storage offloading vessel, which is just like a big boat. Yeah, just like a big boat in the middle of nowhere. So that's much more susceptible to movement, right? Especially in the harsh North Sea weather, versus a platform, which is kind of like, sort of um, effectively bolted to the ground, if you want to call it that, and doesn't sort of experience that much movement. Prior to that, I think the first time I ever went offshore was in like 2015 for a few days. I was on a vessel that was doing some jumper installations for this FPSO that was coming on stream. But yeah, the whole offshore sort of life is different. It's got its pros and cons. I quite enjoy it. I don't see myself doing it for the rest of my career, just because I have sort of other things I would like to accomplish. But the first thing first is, how does one get offshore? So you have to, especially in the North Sea, we fly from Aberdeen, which is where the sort of main heliport is, on a kind of looks like a private jet, but it's really not. It's called a fixed wing. It's just because it's small, but it looks nothing like a private jet. It's just a small plane. Probably about 20 to 25 people on the plane with the pilots and the crew. They fly you to an area called the Shetland Islands. So that's kind of like north of Scotland, and then from there you will get a chopper or helicopter to the installation. So for me, where I am now, it takes about 30 minutes to get there on the chopper. Where I used to be was about 45 minutes, 45 minutes to an hour. The rotation differs depending on what job you have. I used to be on, what was it, 3 and 3, so just equal time rota. So I'm away for 3 weeks, and I come back for a break for 3 weeks. But I'm now on a slightly better contract, actually, which is a 3-4-3-5. So you go offshore for 3 weeks, you come back for 4 weeks, go off for 3 weeks, you come back for 5 weeks. So overall, it kind of translates to, you only do maybe 150 to 160 days of work, and then the rest of the year you have off, right? Which is quite nice if you think about it that way. So for me, it's been good because it's allowed me to be able to kind of like chase a few other like passions without having to worry about the day job because someone else is doing it. So it's obviously got those advantages as well. Ultimately, you're away for 3 weeks at a time. You can't just make it back home for someone's birthday or someone's anniversary or celebration. You're kind of away. So those are the kind of things you kind of tend to miss. But speaking to a lot of people who work offshore, people who have families who have done it for many years, their whole careers, they've found a way to make it work, and they actually talk about the better work-life balance they get. Because if you think about it, when you're offshore, you don't cook your food, you don't have to do your laundry, all of that's done. You sort of focus on the work. You can get into a really good routine if you want to. But when you're off, you get all that quality time to spend with family, friends, loved ones. You can travel if you want, and that time is your time. No one has to bother you. So it's a totally different, but I mean, for me, because I guess the only thing I also wanted to mention in terms of representation offshore, it's very, you don't see a lot of people that look like you offshore. And I think it's two things. One, I think historically, in the UK continental sector anyway, a lot of people who were hired were usually from the sort of Scotland, northeast of England, which was a very predominant white, sort of working class, middle class population. But I think also people just, especially in the African community, the idea of kind of just going away and not being around for work, for family, makes it like such a weird idea. But I think it would actually surprise a lot of people how beneficial a career offshore could be in terms of the work-life balance you might get, if that's your thing.
Very interesting. I'd like to hear your perspective. So we conducted a poll on our Instagram account recently where we wanted to understand where members of our community wanted to be enlightened further. And actually, to my slight surprise, work-life balance came out as top. So, and I think given, your unique experience in offshore oil and gas, you're quite well placed to perhaps share from your personal experience how you approach work-life balance in such a demanding career and field.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question because I don't think, I I was going to say with work-life balance, I'm definitely not an expert on this. And I think we have to acknowledge the fact that it is a struggle, especially in this day and age. We have there's so much information out there, there's so much going on. Because of technology and working from home, our work and our life kind of all seems to merge, into one, and no one really knows where that line is, sort of anymore. For a lot of people who are also entrepreneurs who are trying to be entrepreneurial, it then becomes difficult to kind of like, break from the 9 to 5, have time for yourself, and then chase your personal project. So I think it's great to see that, the reflection from your community sort of flags that it's a big issue. I think for me, in some ways, the role itself drives that to some degree, because once you're offshore, you're working. That's it. You don't really have much else to do, right? Thankfully, offshore, well-being is a big thing, especially in BP, and I can only speak of my experience in BP, but I hope it's the same for other majors. You have a lot to do in your downtime. We've got a library with books if you'd want to read. We've got like a recreational area where people, sort of play pool or tennis in the old place I used to be. We've got video games. We've got a gym, right, where again people can sort of go and let loose, a bit. We've got a music room. We've got a sauna. So there's things that, people kind of are able to do to sort of like, even while they're working, to sort of, take that break, because it's important, because the period you're working is quite intense. So everyone's encouraged to make sure they sort of take that downtime. When you then get back home, well, someone else is doing your job, so you can't actually physically do the work that you're paid to do. So then you've kind of got the opportunity, and I know a lot of my colleagues, even people, my direct reports, you know, don't want to get contacted on their time off, which I think is really, really good. For me personally, I kind of tend to find with 4 weeks or 5 weeks off, I will take a week, I'll take 2 to sort of focus on, personal things I want to get involved in, either through development or getting better at my role, or just like other things that I wanna focus on. And then that still leaves me with 3 weeks, to sort of catch up with friends, again, being at our mutual friends, son's godson's birthday the other time. Again, that's one of the benefits. I can plan my time off, quite easily. I'm learning to play the saxophone at the moment, albeit very badly. And I'm still sort of trying to pick that up. I do a lot of reading. I like to travel. But I think the most important thing, I use the opportunity to catch up with friends and family where I can. And it's kind of good to be able to, go and visit, family for a couple of days, and no, I don't have to, wake up in the morning to go to work, so somewhere. So I think at this stage of my life, I'm quite enjoying what that brings. When I eventually go back to a 9 to 5, I think that will be difficult. So I think in terms of tips, I think the only thing I would just say is, try and find that sort of clear, demarcation, because the work's never going to stop. And unfortunately, it's more difficult now than it used to be with working from home. But just try and, switch off. And I know it's very, very difficult. The work's still going to be there tomorrow when you get back to the office.
That's so fascinating. I think by you uncovering what an experience offshore looks like, it's actually highlighting to me that it's probably better or more attainable in the oil and gas industry, in the offshore oil and gas industry, to achieve a healthy work-life balance. You talked about the demarcation, which I think is a lot harder to achieve in a sort of regular 9 to 5. So I feel like I've learned something new and interesting about the offshore oil and gas industry.
I was gonna say, I've thought about a few things before where I've kind of said along the lines of, maybe if you had 2 or 3 people doing the same job that you did, and you could swap it around in a year, but then the question is who's going to pay for all of those people, right? So it gets a bit complicated for sure.
Right. So we're going to be moving on now to the impact of visibility. Your accomplishments, Tolu, clearly demonstrate that you are someone who is exceptionally skilled and has a high performance work ethic. But I was at a networking event earlier on this year. It was actually a networking event hosted by the Black British Business Awards, where the founder, the amazing Dr. Sophie Chadinaka, who is probably one of the most compelling speakers I've ever heard, talked about the 4 Ps that contribute to career advancement and progression. So she said the first P is performance, the second is profile, the third is potential, and the fourth is platform. Now, I kind of want to dwell on the profile piece, in this segment of the interview. Um, the performance, you've clearly got that on lock, right? And I believe you've got the other P's on lock as well. But there is a school of thought that, you've just got to work hard and just perform. And what that networking, event showed me was there's more than performing well that you need to establish, an amazing career trajectory. So on the profile piece, you are someone who I consider a prominent figure in your company, in your industry, as well as a community. But I also know that the profile piece, which is, very much central to visibility, can be a bit of a cringe, experience for some people. So I just wanted you to, share with our audience, how have you been able to build your visibility whilst remaining authentic to yourself?
Yeah. I think it's definitely a mindset shift. If I quickly go through my example, same thing, doing a good job in my role and kept doing a good job, wasn't getting anywhere, and just kept being told to do more of a good job and become much more technically minded. And I was kind of like, what, there's other things I want to do. This organization's so huge, I'd like to try this. And to be fair, one of the turning points for me was when I got involved with BRG in the company, actually.
What does a BRG stand for, by the way, so our audience understand?
Yes, BRG is a business resource group, or they're also called ethnicity resource groups. So they have in other companies. And these groups are there to sort of foster a sense of community and belonging for people who are, from that sort of specific, group, be it, a women's group or something to do with gender or race or disability, um, whatever that may be, right? So these groups, I think, try to sort of help to create that social interaction for people who are in that company, which again, I guess helps ultimately for people to feel a part and, want to stay in the company for longer and do some impactful things. Um, and what I realized very quickly, because I got involved in it, and then the opportunity came to lead the BRG, which in 2021 I applied for and was fortunate to get. And it allowed me to be able to showcase an element of myself that had been difficult so far to be able to showcase in my current role, because I was not a leader at the time. I was just an individual contributor. So conversations around how you manage a budget, conversation about how you deliver a vision, for growth, a strategy, how you track, how well you're doing, how you interact across all levels of the organization to drive that same message, how you use communications. Like, it was such a huge broadening experience for me on top of my day job. And a lot of the awards, the accolades, the recognition, the profile that I've built has come from that, which is very counterintuitive in a weird way, because I'm like, well, what about all the work I've been doing since, And then you very quickly realize two things. So it's one of the things one of my mentors says, it's not always about who you know, it's about who knows you. And it's more important to be known by the decision makers than for you to know who they are and them not knowing you. Because if you don't know what your value proposition is, what your brand is, what your one word or two words, they always say, okay, what are your two words? Okay, this person is a change maker. This person adds value. This person likes to do difficult, complicated projects. Whatever that is, those people who know you, if they know that's what you're about and they've seen that, when conversations come about opportunities, they can associate that word and that with you. And then in the bit of authenticity that you kind of talked about, and this is difficult, I think, especially for people who have grown up in African households, right, where you're kind of not supposed to be, you're supposed to be seen, not heard, and you're not supposed to, talk too much, or big yourself up. And we obviously have a lot we do around, because, we're very, very religious. We attribute praise to God, because, if not for him, we won't be where we are. However, it's also important for us to look at it as not a way of like bragging or bigging ourselves up. Actually, it's a way of you just showcasing or talking about the value you can bring. And I think everyone wants to deliver impact in some way in the world. And you can't only necessarily do it by yourself. You kind of need other people to be able to see that you can deliver that impact. So when you start to look at it and frame it that way, actually, it's quite important for people to know what you do. And I think actually exposing yourself to other, you know, opportunities, through BRGs, through groups, like the AFBE, Energy Institute of Young Professionals. There's so many opportunities you can get involved because it builds your network, but it also allows you to showcase skills you might not actually be able to do in your day to day, which then ultimately over time builds your profile. So while I'm grateful for the recognition, I would say in some ways it's actually just come about by thinking about how can I add value, how can I serve, and thankfully the recognitions, the accolades, that people who have seen the work, the energy I put into things have nominated me for things. I've been lucky to win them, and that's kind of just built over time. So I do feel very, very privileged and very, very lucky. But based on what I've learned over the last few years, I would encourage people, kind of what is your brand? What do you want to be known for? And try and start to tap into that in a way that you can share that story as well with other people, because there's so many people who want to develop people, who want to see people grow. And yeah, I'll just say take
I
advantage of the opportunity.
totally agree with everything you've said. I've always been a proponent of looking for opportunities beyond your 9 to 5, be it internally within your organization or externally, to grow a breadth of skills and yeah, to build connections. I think doing those things, which is usually fundamentally done through actually finding what you're passionate about and just seeking to make a difference, can be so career, you know, game changing. And it's definitely a school of thought that has been echoed by so many guests that have featured on this platform. One key phrase I took away from, the many amazing points you mentioned is, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. I'm just going to leave that there. I think there's a lot to be said about that. Right. Okay. So we're going to be talking a little bit more now about your diversity and inclusion advocacy work and your recent accomplishment. So the two of us have a connection to the Black British Business Awards. I was selected as a finalist in the STEM category last year as a rising star. And this year, hot off the press, because the award ceremony were held last night. So thank you for coming in to record this. You were declared, this year's winner in the STEM category. Amazing, amazing accomplishment. Congratulations. I'm super, super happy for you. Well done. So considering the prestige around the Black British Business Awards, as well as your own passion for diversity and inclusion, what does it mean to be recognized?
It means a lot. The story behind it is also very, very funny. A few days before the deadline was due, I was messaged by someone in the team to say someone's nominated you, but they can't fill in your details. So can you fill it? And by the way, the deadline is in a few days. And I was like, so I spent some time researching it and realized what I think I really liked about the Black British Business Awards was the fact that it kind of brought the two things I'm really sort of passionate about. So it's not just focused on what you do in the D&I space or in the social space, but also like what you deliver in your day-to-day job. So I think the fact that I was able to, it gave me the opportunity to kind of bring those two together and really talk about it in a powerful way. And honestly, I think there's 36 finalists in sort of various categories, and everyone's story to a person is inspiring. So, you know, I'm very, very grateful and very, very privileged to have won the award, but it could have been any one of those finalists. I think for me, it's three things. One, it's validation. I think that I'm on the right track in terms of what I want to do with my career. Two, it's the exposure, right? Because you're in a room with people, from CEOs to execs to people who are just starting up, exactly, who are all there to kind of celebrate what you're there for, which is, the emergence and the power of Black talent within the UK, within the various sort of spaces we work in. And then three is about what do you want your legacy and your brand to be. And it really got me to think about how can I really start to put myself, sort of out there, to kind of talk about the things that I'm really passionate about, but that could make a bit of an impact. And it's nice to be able to have the support from my company as well, to have been able to, because it's through that, it's through them that I was able to get these opportunities. So yeah, it really, really means a lot. It's still a bit surreal. And I keep saying that, I keep saying that to a lot of people. It's less than 24 hours since the ceremony, but really, really pleased. And it's nice to be recognized in that way, for sure.
Amazing. So you lead the Positive Ethnicity Network within your company. And I think we've obviously talked a lot today about the amazing benefits one can gain from being involved within these communities and networks at work. So I wondered whether you could share some of your insights as, the lead for the Positive Ethnicity Network and your experiences. I think it might be useful for someone who's, upon hearing our conversation today, who decides actually that they want to seek such opportunities as well, similar opportunities. What are some insights and and experiences that you've had that you can share with our audience?
And I think it's a great opportunity. I think first of all, you want to have the passion to do it. It's going to take, it's added time in some ways on top of your day job. The ideal situation, it's like it's the 15 to 20% on top of the 80%, as opposed to your maxed out work. And I know that differs from company to company, but um I think even outside of them, and that's what I'm trying to think about in my experience, even outside of the passion you have for it, it's a really good opportunity, because in BP, it's a leadership role. So there's actually a lot that comes with it in terms of building a high performing team. Again, strategy, driving change, communications, interaction with all levels of the organization. How do you measure progress? Um, how do you bring a team of people together to deliver and be very clear on what the plan is, and to deliver the plan, people who are also doing it on their spare time? They're not being paid for it. So you learn a lot about how you influence people, how you get people to do things without necessarily telling them, because they're not going to get paid for it, so they don't have to listen to you. And it's sort of really driving into leadership as opposed to management. So I think, even the passion aside, it's such a huge opportunity for growth as an individual. And like you say, it's just experiences you might not get in your day-to-day job, because by the time you get to that point as a VP or a senior manager, you're probably 15, 20, 25 years into your career, potentially, but you get that opportunity in your very early to mid-career to demonstrate that. So I think for me, it's a good opportunity, and I never thought about it in that way until I started to get the opportunity. And then the network you build is amazing. It's not just within your company, it's outside. It's all the other amazing bodies like the Black British Business Awards, Investing in Ethnicity, the AFBE, and so many others who have fellow like-minded change makers all over. So you feel part of a strong community of people. You share ideas. I mean, it's just, it's really, really rewarding. Can be busy, but it's really rewarding. And I think you also learn, just to round up, how to do work quicker, because you start to learn, like, there's deadlines and there's lots of things. So actually, I think it improves your ability to deliver as well, because all of a sudden you're just not thinking about your day job, you're delivering that, but you have a meeting here, and then you have a slide pack to deliver, you've got a conference to attend, and you have to sort of juggle all of those balls. So actually, when you go back into your day job and you're handling multiple priorities, I think you learn how to also cope better with multitasking. So I think for me, it's beneficial in so many ways.
Excellent. So we are now coming on to the final question. I can't believe how quickly time has passed. But yeah, I'd like us to round up on, the future, what the future holds for you. What are you most excited about in your 9 to 5 career, and also the many advocacy work that you support?
Yeah, I think from an advocacy perspective, I just want to continue doing what I can to support those conversations around challenging the representation in the corporate UK, or just in general, but also getting to a point where I feel like I can start to pass on my knowledge and my experience, to be a mentor for people. For me, the ideal situation is not me being in a lead role for the next 2, 3, 4 years, where there are other people who are also equally as, if not even more passionate and more talented, than I am, to be able to come in and bring their own flavor to it. I think roles like this should be a sort of continuous pool of almost like a leadership incubator for lots of people who don't have that opportunity in their day jobs. And if I can help to sort of start to drive the message that these roles are actually strategic roles, which any company, who has these BRGs or ERGs, and look at people who are leading that, who are spending time in addition to their day job to be able to deliver that kind of change. As a CEO, if I was in a leadership role, I'll be looking at those people actually as potential leaders in the organization or elsewhere. So for me, in that case, I just kind of want to continue doing what I'm doing, and hopefully pass it on to other people to do even better than I have. In my career, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing right now, learning the sort of operations world and how things work, how you sort of create a culture of safety, how we really try to embed that in the people to say, we want everyone to get home safe, to go back home to their families, because ultimately that's what it's about. And how do you ensure that we manage the risks, the operational risks of working in such a high hazard industry? How do I continue to grow in that? Because if I want to sort of meet my vision eventually of, working in, lower carbon, or still in oil and gas, or delivering energy to locations which don't have that access, this period I am is giving me a really good foundation. And I hope to also be able to encourage more people. I think if I was to have a legacy, to consider um, working in the energy industry, because I just think there's so much opportunity there, be it traditional oil and gas or renewables or a combination of both. It's something we need. I mean, energy is so intertwined in our day-to-day lives. Sometimes we don't think about it that way because we have access to it. But being born and raised in Nigeria, lack of electricity, lack of energy, everything stops. You can't the opportunity to access information, the opportunity to create a business, to progress, if you want to call it, on that sort of socioeconomic scale, is heavily hampered if you don't have access to electricity. So if I can play a small part in sort of being part of that solution, where we kind of are able to deliver sort of safe, affordable, reliable energy to places that don't have it, and I was to look back at my career and be like, yeah, I got involved in that, I did that, then, for me, that would be success, I think. So
Amazing. Well, I love the fact that there's such a huge focus on people, both in, the advocacy work that you plan to do and also in your career. I'm sure I'm going to be hearing great things and greater accomplishments from you for sure. And that brings us to the end of the interview. Guys, I'm sure you'll agree that Tolu has been an absolutely brilliant guest. I've taken so much away from my conversation with him, and I can imagine that the same is the case with you. Make sure you share your key takeaways in the comment section. And whilst you're there, hit the like and the subscribe buttons. And yeah, see you at the next episode. Bye.